Imagine a civilization larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. A vast network of planned cities with advanced drainage, private bathrooms, and standardized bricks, all thriving more than 4,000 years ago along the Indus River. This is the story of the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan culture. It stretched across what is now Pakistan and western India. Its western edge reached near the modern Iran-Pakistan border. Eastward it extended toward present-day Mumbai. Northward it reached the western bend of the Ganges River, forming a rough triangle with the Indus River at its heart. Like the Nile in Egypt or the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, the Indus and its tributaries fed this civilization. The great city of Mohenjo-Daro stood on the Indus itself. Harappa rose on one of its tributaries. The modern world first noticed these ruins in 1856, when British engineers building a railway found exceptionally high-quality ancient bricks and used them for the tracks. In 1892, General Sir Alexander Cunningham, Director General of the Indian Archaeological Survey, began more systematic study. In the 1920s, archaeologists including Sir John Marshall and Dr. Ernest Mackay uncovered the full scale of what they had found. English writer S.G. Blaxland Stubbs later noted that these discoveries delivered a shock to prevailing ideas of racial and cultural hierarchy. Here was clear evidence of a complex civilization whose achievements equaled, and in some respects surpassed, those of early Mesopotamia and Egypt. Within this territory, archaeologists have identified around 1,000 settlements. Most were small villages of 2 to 5 acres near rivers or streams. Notable sites include Kalibangan, Quetta, Lothal, and Chanhu-Daro. But the two great centers were Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Because of Harappa's prominence, many scholars call the entire culture Harappan. Each of the two capitals is estimated to have housed about 40,000 people. What strikes observers most is the sophistication of the city planning. Both major cities followed similar layouts, deliberate, grid-like patterns with wide main streets running north-south and east-west. One modern description compared it to a miniature Manhattan. Main boulevards measured about 35 feet wide. Shops and restaurants lined the streets. The most important public structures were the granary, the citadel, and the Great Bath. One large building, measuring roughly 230 by 78 feet, has been interpreted as the residence of a high official, possibly a high priest or a college of priests. Sir Mortimer Wheeler compared the granary to a modern state bank. The Great Bath complex at Mohenjo-Daro measured about 185 feet long and 100 feet wide. A thick surrounding wall contained 6 entrances. The bath itself was a carefully constructed 20 by 40 foot pool, 8 feet deep, made watertight with bricks set in gypsum mortar and sealed with bitumen. Drains allowed the water to be changed regularly. Marshall and Mackay judged the construction so solid that even in the 1930s it could not be improved upon by modern builders. After 5,000 years, it still holds water. Ordinary houses were entered from side streets. Many rose 2 or more stories around a central courtyard. Windows faced inward for privacy and to keep out dust from the unpaved streets. Nearly every household had trash chutes that emptied into tunnels leading to central sewers. Most dwellings had private bathrooms with drains connected to the main system, and almost every house had its own private well. Earthenware drain pipes set in gypsum mortar and brickwork were standard. Sir Mortimer Wheeler observed that the sanitary arrangements at Mohenjo-Daro could be envied in many parts of the world, even in his own time. They reflected high living standards and careful municipal oversight. Anthropologist Walter Farservice highlighted another striking feature: standardization. Bricks were made to uniform sizes and laid in consistent patterns. Drainage systems, house dimensions, public buildings, weights, measures, pottery shapes, and even everyday objects followed standard designs. The people grew barley, wheat, cotton, peas, sesame, and other crops. They kept cattle, buffalo, cats, and dogs. and may have domesticated pigs, camels, horses, asses, and elephants. They traded vigorously with Mesopotamia. Cotton was a major export, along with copper, gold, lapis lazuli, timber, and turquoise. The port of Lothal featured a dock controlled by a sluice gate that allowed ships to load and unload at different tides. They produced jewelry of gold, silver, and precious stones, though most everyday objects were of wood, bone, clay, flint, or shell. They used a system of standardized weights and measures. The Harappans had a written script. Scholars know of more than 2,000 surviving texts using about 419 signs, of which roughly 200 were in common use. The system was logosyllabic. Some signs stood for whole words, others for syllables. Literacy appears to have been relatively widespread. The script appears frequently as graffiti on pottery. Attempts to link it to other ancient scripts, from Minoan to Easter Island, have so far failed to produce a full decipherment. Artistic finds include fine sculptures from Harappa that Marshall said a Greek sculptor of the 4th century BC might have been proud to claim. Children played with model animals that nodded, elephant-shaped rattles, bird-shaped clay whistles, toy carts, balls, and marbles. Notably absent from the archaeological record are clear signs of kings, great temple complexes, or chronic warfare between the Harappan cities themselves. The earliest villages in the region appear between 7,000 and 6,000 BC. Planned cities such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa emerged sometime between 3,000 and 2,500 BC. Sir Mortimer Wheeler, once Director General of Archaeology in India, favoured a mature period beginning around 2300 BC, linking it to trade with the Sargonid dynasty of Mesopotamia. Yet the chronology of Sargon himself has shifted over time. Earlier scholars, relying on the cylinder of Nabonidus, once placed him as early as 3800 BC. Later estimates moved him to around 2650 BC. Sir John Marshall, using seals found at Kish and Ur, dated the Indus civilization's flourishing period to roughly 3250 to 2750 BC. Our own alignment with broader Egyptian and Mesopotamian chronologies places the mature phase, contemporary with Sargon, around 2895 BC. Toward the end of the 3rd millennium BC, excavations show evidence of horse-riding invaders raiding villages in Baluchistan to the west. By about 1800 BC, further waves from the western steppes pressed in. City populations densified. Large houses were subdivided into smaller units. Defenses were strengthened. One of Mohenjo-Daro's 4 gateways was blocked. Skeletal remains tell a grim story. Groups of bodies, some of them children, were found in contorted positions, apparently killed during raids. The Rig Veda, the ancient Aryan collection of hymns, describes Indra destroying hundreds of the fortified places of the Dasas, the indigenous people, and killing tens of thousands. Resistance was strong. Harappan forces, sometimes numbering in the thousands, fought back. The struggle for control continued for centuries, culminating, according to tradition, in the great conflict remembered as the Mahabharata. Many of the original inhabitants migrated eastward and southward, where their descendants remain concentrated today. Where the newcomers established dominance, they imposed a hierarchical social order that later became the caste system, an early form of structured inequality based on color and status. The original dark-skinned inhabitants, who had built one of the world's earliest urban civilizations, were relegated to the lower ranks. Color prejudice has remained a persistent feature of life on the subcontinent. South Indian journalist V.T. Rajshekhar summarized the view of many. The original inhabitants of India were dark-skinned people who founded the Indus Valley Civilisation. Invading Aryan tribes destroyed that civilization and used religious ideology to enforce a lasting hierarchy. The Indus Valley Civilization left no long royal inscriptions or grand temples of the kind familiar from Egypt and Mesopotamia. What it left instead was something rarer: evidence of orderly cities, sophisticated engineering, widespread literacy, and a society that valued standardization and sanitation on a scale unmatched for millennia. Its story challenges simple narratives of progress and reminds us how much of the ancient world still remains only partly understood. The bricks, the baths, the seals, and the skeletons continue to speak, if we are willing to listen. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.